disclaimer! On the other one, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
There's something universally special about a solidly built, large-scale transformer. The weight, the size, the gimmicks, the increased articulation. Well, most of the time anyway. It's not even a nostalgia thing either. The reveal of the new Takara Leader Class Optimus Primal has people incredibly excited. Can't say I share that excitement, but I'm pleased for those that do, and I absolutely get it. That said, modern retail Leader Class isn't the same as classic retail Leader Class. As costs rise and restrictions pile up, it makes sense that everything would begin to shrink. Absolutely no slight against modern Leader Class, mind you. A lot of these, even if they shrunk in the dryer, are some of the best releases in the past 5 years. Of course, the craving for the chunk factor never truly goes away, and that's why we really have to give more credit to the Commander class. I've said it before, but it needs reiterating. Modern Commander class is essentially classic Leader class, and I couldn't be happier for it. Starting out strong with the best Jetfire ever, one that hasn't been toppled since, and reaching new heights with Skylynx, who is still one of the best War for Cybertron trilogy toys ever, Hastak's new initiative seemed incredibly promising. However, it's been 3 years since that set graced our collection, and since then, things haven't been the same. Rodimus was a damn fine figure, but the trailer definitely felt lacking in terms of play function. If you only take plastic quantity into consideration, it's exactly on the money for the Commander price point. But compared to what other trailers and add-ons were doing at the time, at least from my perspective, it seemed a bit lacking. And sure, it was G1 accurate, but that was it. It was G1 accurate and nothing beyond that. And as for Motormaster, well, he was pretty damn good, but he's less a self-contained commander and more a prerequisite for Menasor. And sure, Menasor is the best combiner Hasbro has done, period. I don't think anyone can argue against that. It's just, as a standalone release, Motormaster is simply decent. Neither of the last commanders are bad by any stretch, it's just there's a certain charm to large-scale figures that wasn't present with them. A charm that myself, as well as a few others, have certainly been feeling the loss of. Also, I'm not counting Starsaber because he wasn't available at general retail, and quality-wise, he was basically a souped-up MP, so he didn't do much to alleviate the longing either. It's also not something that can be supplanted by Titans. It's unique to them, and can neither be substituted nor forgotten. However, after 3 long years, that wait might just be over. Hell, we're not just at the same level we used to be, we might just be at heights previously undiscovered. Greetings, Cybertronians, I'm Dr. Lockdown, and it is with absolute pleasure that today's diagnosis pertains to Legacy Evolution, Armada Universe, Optimus Prime. Outside of the whole Commander class lull, Armada Prime in his own right has been a long time coming. For those not aware, this isn't actually the first initiative to get the character done in a modern chug style. In the long past year of 2019, when Siege was in the air and hopes for the Netflix show were still high for everyone except myself, Takara quote-unquote announced their version of the Micron Legend Classic. It wasn't clear which line the figure was going to release in, as the plaque didn't have much information beyond a convoy. Yes, he is indeed a convoy. In other news, the sky is blue, G.I. Joe Megatron sucks, G1 Gold Box Prime with a black trailer is just the Mandela effects, and Bionicle is still gone and never coming back. Well, it remains to be seen with that last one, but seriously, stop trying to make Gold Box Black Trailer Prime a thing. It never was! Also, I don't think any of my audience is going to get that reference, but f it. Thing is, the prototype unveiling wasn't all it initially seemed. Turns out said prototype wasn't actually capable of transformation in both vehicle mode and combined mode. The supposed hidden combiner joints were actually fakes within the sculpting. Hell, it turns out some of the pins meant to facilitate the conversion were fake as well. The prototype was but a facade, and I mean in a literal sense. It's not a real building. Turns out, the prototype was shown to gauge interest in an update of the Unicron Trilogy Classic, and from there they would decide whether to release it in Legends EX, along with the also revealed Star Convoy, or Masterpiece, which was previously one of the choices Japanese fans could vote for in their Masterpiece poll. Starsaber won that poll, by the way, which could be seen as a good thing or a bad thing depending on your point of view. And when faced with a choice of either line, turns out they just didn't. About a year later, people asked the Takara representatives at another Tokyo Toy Show, and they said they hadn't decided yet. A year after that, the Takara representatives weren't even aware of its existence anymore. People often point to the brand unification as a reason, but that took place 2 years prior, so, that hypothesis, stupid! That said, I bring this up not because it's a cool fact in the long history of this figure, but rather because it is likely instrumental in the Legacy version being made to begin with. While the Takara prototype was sadly naught but smoke smoke and mirrors, it did get the ball rolling. People kept clamoring for its news on the release, even if it never was planned, and I'm sure Hasbro noticed it. With the handover to Mark, Evan, Ben, and Sam, design managers who were well versed in Transformers social media, there's no way they didn't see it. And with Warden off on his way to ruin Power Rangers, it's obvious they knew this was their chance to do right by the fandom. As if manifested from the Persona 2 duology, where rumors become reality, the hype for a non-existent toy formed the basis for this release. As such, this figure seems like a double case of Finally, Commander Class is getting back to its roots with beefy, chunky fun, and finally the Takara prophecy is fulfilled. And then it'd be one thing if it was a disappointment. Not every update turns out as good as you would have wanted. In this case though, I think they might have nailed it. In truck mode, it's really like they've just taken the original and fixed some of its proportions. The original Armada Prime was very much a product of its transformation. Its proportional oddities were a direct result of where the arms ended up. They didn't so much as make a robot out of a vehicle, but rather made a vehicle out of a robot. A practice not uncommon for the Unicron trilogy. It was kind of a 50-50 on which the designers would do way back in that 4-year period. Essentially, this vehicle mode is a cleaned up version of the Armada Classic, and that ideology basically extends to the rest of the design. To be honest, sometimes that's all you need. Sure, there are some cases where the original is terrible and needs to be reworked from the ground up, and occasionally the OG is boring and needs some new ideas injected into it. The recent Insecticons regrettably say hi. I don't think Armada Prime is one of those types though. The original, design-wise, was quite the solid figure. It's just the hardware that mostly caused issues. By virtue of said original design, Prime looks mean as f from practically every angle. The grille at the front looks fully ready to crash in the air like a runaway train. Damn, we're really going hard on the Bionicle memes in this video. The silver paint and mechanical detail pops super hard. What used to be clips masquerading as headlights has been turned into a full-on floodlight system. No extra paint on show, but considering how much this figure does already, it's a minor thing. Same with the missing remainder of the silver grate. Would have liked that there, but what's here is already pulling a lot of weight. Moving further back, the tamper graphing and mechanical detail are essentially copied verbatim. You get like one extra piston in there, but aside from that, it's basically Armada. But again, fortunately, the arms have been tidied up a bit. They fold into the door sections much more smoothly, leaving only a small gap below the windows. Legitimately, this is the only part of the truck mode I take issue with. If there were a panel or a flap that folded out to fill it in, this would have been practically perfect. Though, knowing my luck, there's probably a hidden step I've missed that a billion comments will pull me up on. According to the product shots though, doesn't look like it. Still, worst comes to worst, the pipes are War for Cybertron Blast Effect compatible. I say War for Cybertron specifically because it feels that series was the last time they bothered to include any blast effects. They really need to rectify that going forward. No, not like that! I do find it funny though that Armada Prime can turn into a demonically possessed murder truck, yet Studio Series Scourge cannot. Seems like a gimmick better suited for that fellow, even if Armada Prime only gets it because they're supposed to be guns in the robot mode. Now while the front section remains fully faithful to the original, the back goes hard on the greebling. Legitimately, it almost feels like this figure has gone back in time to the siege line. Honestly though, it kinda works. Due to the robot legs and combined arms function, it's not really possible to thin this out and make it accurate to a real trailer hitch. Not that this is a real truck anyway. It's gotta be boxy, so why not go nuts? It's solid as f and rolls with it by making a statement. Speaking of, the rolling works incredibly well thanks to the use of pin wheels. This isn't something uncommon with Commander class figures. Hell, save for Skylinks, I'm pretty sure it's been a staple of the line. Also, fun fact, Prime's wavemate Megatron also comes with pinned wheels. Sure, they're fake, but these two both end up rolling very well. Matter of fact, they're built very similarly in terms of density, detail, and engineering. They feel like they're cut from the same cloth, probably because Hasui designed these back to back, or at least there's a high chance of that. Regardless, it's always a treat to see, so once again, it's greatly appreciated. And sure, the hands are very visible, more so than the original in terms of coloring. Thanks to needing to remain flush to the trailer, as well as the complexity of the foot mechanism, there's basically no room in there. Mark my words, DNA will try, but in terms of engineering out of the box, it's just not feasible. And you know what? That's okay! There have been plenty of trucks that have done worse recently, and those seem to get a pass. I'm 99% sure I've said this in a video before, but if this is okay, and this is okay, and this is okay, and this is okay. Okay, maybe that last one ain't, but if all of these are okay, then we should be able to give this one a pass. And hey, at the end of the day, I'd much rather have the hands a little more prominent and tucked away at the back than having them fully on show but color matched. It's not even a side grade, it's genuinely better than the original. Besides, once it's on the trailer, you won't be seeing it anyway. But hey, if you're a psychopath, you can indeed fan mode it to have the fists out. This looks ugly as shit, but hey, it's an option. If you prefer this for some bizarre reason and find it a perfectly fine trade-off that it permanently ruins the trailer compatibility, please seek professional help. Speaking of trailers though, me, this is badass. Trailers have often been hit or miss in mainline, and even if they have been more on the hit side, it's always been at the stage of, yeah, it's cool, but it could be better. This right here is the first time in ages I've taken a look at something and said, yeah, we don't really need to improve on this. Sure, upgrades would be nice, but it just doesn't feel like it's absolutely necessary. Last time I felt this way in regards to a trailer was way back in Power of the Primes, which makes me think the way to my heart is combining with one's trailer. Though I added upgrades to the Siege Magnus family of molds, not to mention Motormaster, so even then Armada Prime's trailer is a real achievement. It's an absolute beast of a thing, chunky in plastic, covered in paint, loaded with greebling, and most importantly, actually looks cohesive. I don't think enough people appreciate just how much of an overhaul this trailer has, because the original, especially on the top, looks like improperly mixed scrambled eggs.
Would have preferred waffles.
Oh haha, very funny. I also appreciate they didn't just copy what the anime did, where they had these long normal truck sections. Sure, it could have worked, but is such an idea really worthy of a toy like this? I just don't think so, and I'm incredibly glad they decided to deviate and give us something truly special. You just know the Takara version, as stylized as they would have made it, would have gone accurate on that part. Of course, there's still echoes of the original design, with how the trailer splits off in the middle a bit to make way for the blaster, but for the most part, the top section is entirely original. It's also a case where the original ideas don't look like they've been pulled from the designer's ass. They blend in with everything already on show, and they feel purposeful in their own right. I appreciate they've added some crisp blue paint on the sides to mimic the bleed through of the combined mode legs. It's a neat throwback that shows they know the source material without feeling the need to go ham on the one-to-one recreation. It's also an incredibly nice change of pace when compared to shit shows like Zeta Superatron. Yes, that video was 3 months ago and I still haven't fully recovered. When they do go one-to-one, however, it turns out insanely well. The stripes on the side are classic Armada segmented, with just a bit of extra greebling. Helps hide the tab slot too, mind you. Either way, it's once again done crisply and with substantial color fill. This might seem innocuous, but remember, Roddy's trailer was wispy at bits due to improper application. Again, Rodimus himself was fine, it's just that damn trailer that keeps insisting on being an issue. Moving further down, the treads are a little more segmented from the rest of the design, but given its service as the backpacking combined mode, it's something easily overlooked. Given the way they're pins though, I can't help but feel there was an intent to make these rubber. In fact, a text-based leak way back when actually stated it would be such, but obviously that never came to pass. Not gonna lie though, given the way this transformed, coupled with the issues with rubber treads, I'm kinda glad they didn't bother. And bringing it around the back, yes, you do get some combiner joint and hip skirt kibble, but honestly, I reckon it blends into the design quite well. Sure, the original does this part better, but compared to the top section, yeah, I think it's a perfectly good sacrifice. That said, I can't forgive everything with this trailer. Sure, the issues here aren't anything horrible, but I always need to be honest about what I review and point out when something goes wrong, even if I receive a sample for free. It's just the right thing to do. Firstly, Autobot symbols. These needed white backings. The actual red they use does pop quite well, but there's a big difference between the original and the Legacy version. The plastic color. Armada goes for a light stone grey, while Legacy goes for a deep silver, teetering on the edge of gunmetal. I absolutely adore this change, as not only does it look gorgeous, but it also sidesteps the potential pitfall of Games Workshop grey. Honestly, I keep looking back through my collection count spreadsheet and I genuinely can't find the last time we were hit with that nightmare of a color, so kudos to Hashtag for taking the feedback. That said, deviating from accuracy has worked a lot on this figure so far, but here it's a definite downgrade for the sake of pricing. In my book, accuracy is neither a positive nor a negative. It's a stylistic choice. Quality is independent of whether something is accurate or not, but in this instance, deviation has not been beneficial. Secondly, the trailer posts have a tendency to fall down when the figure gets the slightest bit of pressure on the top side. A locking mechanism would have really sealed the deal here, but alas, it's an annoyance. That's about it for proper flaws though. Of course, there are things I wish they could have done, such as allowing an extra trailer post for the out-of-box fan mode. When you first open the figure, the trailer is actually packaged like this. It's pretty impractical, as the bottom no longer locks in place, the gun pod for the base mode has to be left off to the side, and the trailer posts become useless. But I kinda like the way this looks. It would have been nice to include a separate trailer post here, but I get why it's not. It was a purely unintentional packaging thing they did, and it's not accurate at all. It's just me being a moron, so in essence, it's a day ending in Y. Something that's a bit more justifiable is the inclusion of Minicon housing, like on the original, but one, with a new ankle-tilted feet in there, that's literally impossible, and two, he doesn't even come with one. Yeah, since the Micromasters crashed and burned, Hasbro has been rather hesitant to go in on that sort of price point. Supposedly, there's a pack of a few of them on the horizon, but we don't know how or when it'll be released, or even if the listing is real for that matter. I will say though, no idea why Prime has no Minicon ports. Hotshot was smart enough to include one for backwards backwards compatibility, though annoyingly Starscream didn't bother. However, if you expand to other Unicron Trilogy releases, Override came with a CyberKey port, compatible with the original CyberKeys, albeit missing the functionality. But alas, no 4mm nubs of joy here. Bit of an oversight if you ask me, even if I'm probably the only guy on the planet who has most of the original main minicons, but none of their original Armada toys outside of Demolishor. The original Prime you've been seeing isn't mine, it's Michael's. Still, none of that does anything to stop this trailer from being probably the best trailer Hasbro has ever done in generations. It's chunky, insanely well painted, reinvents the original where it needs to, but keeps it faithful when it doesn't. Gives you a hefty amount of detail, picks appropriate colors that don't force you to go out and buy toy hacks, or even further, spray paint the whole thing, and just presents effortless fun from all angles. It's got plenty of functionality beyond that, but of course, those are things to discuss at a later time in the video, especially since the script is on page 5. Yeah, it's gonna be one of those videos. Size-wise, this thing is big. It's actually a similar mass to both Motormaster's and Rodimus's trailers, with a comparable height and majority of width, only swapping out the length for those pods on the sides. Of course, that's pre-DNA Motormaster. I had to borrow from Michael again since my copy is all DNA'd up. Regardless, you're getting your money's worth in terms of sheer plastic. Play value will come into, well, play later, but at least in vehicle mode, things are looking promising with value for money. Of course, next to the original, it's clear there's been a shrinkage. And that's okay, it's bound to happen over the years. And thankfully, it's not to a ridiculous degree. Might just be me, but from practically every angle, this is a complete upgrade. Doesn't always happen with legacy figures, but here, this is just better. Regardless, the package is off to an insanely well start. There's no funny business like with the last two trailers, or at least not on the same level. Both parts integrate well, and they haven't compromised the proportions thanks to the budget. If anything, they've gone above and beyond to make things better. Everything that needs to be kept the same remains intact, but they're not afraid to change things either. The best way to describe it is with a single phrase. This is a f***ing truck. Much like the vehicle mode we just discussed, Armada Universe Optimus Prime is a wonderful mix of classic nostalgia and brand new innovative ideas. It's not a crazy transformation by any means. I mean, the trailer kind of gets close in some areas, but for the most part it's just simple. But it's simple and fun. It's not just boring. The original figure was a very fun figure, so to just do that again in Legacy, it works here. Doesn't necessarily work every time, but in this case, it's pretty good. First thing you want to do on Optimus Prime is push down this section down there, so that it becomes nice and flush with the rest of it. This is supposed to cover up the arms just a little bit and distract you from, you know, them just sticking there, unlike the original, which didn't cover it that well. I wouldn't say it's a necessary transformation step, and I could kind of take it or leave it, but it is good to have. And hey, maybe it'll play a bigger part when Jetfire gets in the mix. You want to take these front bits and rotate them to the sides like so. They actually lock into place, so they're not just flopping around. Then you can bring this section down. At the bottom here, you've got a nice double hinge with these two tabs from the combined arms and the chest kind of folding together, and it all clicks together nicely. And it's nice that even though you can't turn the head around, it does get covered up on the bottom when you transform it. Separate the arms from the sides like so, and then you got these double shoulder hinges, which I'm not really a fan of. They're a bit of a pain in the ass to move, but it's part of the original transformation, so I do get it, and they do lock in quite nicely. Not bad, just could be better. You bring the elbows fully forward to reveal the forearms, and you rotate the fists into place like so. You untab the wheels and you bring them around here, and there's a nice locking point there. This is the only real flimsy part of the transformation. Everything feels nice and solid. Those are the only bits that I feel could break off if you're not careful. But even then, it's not really that bad. You take the legs and you bring them down ever so slightly so that it untabs from those tabs there. That'll give you enough clearance to bring out the side skirts. And then after they're out, you can bring up the back skirt. And of course, bring the knees back into place because he doesn't want to be bending forward. You bring up these panels here, fold out the feet, which also allows you to access the ankle tilt, and fold these down once again. Last but not least, you just undo them like that, and that's it. Again, super simple transformation, nothing crazy at all, but very addictive. You find yourself wanting to do it over and over again. And sometimes that's the only kind of transformation you need. I mean, especially on a big chunky fella like this. A nice simple chunky transformation works really well. Now, normally I wouldn't bother talking about the base mode because previous base modes I've discussed on this channel, especially with the Commander class price points, they've all been a bit iffy. But this time, they've actually put some thought into it. It's not the same as the original, and I'll get more into that later, but it is good. It's got a dedicated transformation. It's got dedicated locking tabs. Last time we had that, I think, was Dark of the Moon Optimus Prime, and because this has a third mode on top of that, It's pretty damn good. First thing you want to do is bring up these. This will give you enough clearance for everything else. That'll give you the space to come in with your thumbs and undo these bits and bring this section down just so we got a bit of clearance. Come around to the side and take the Autobot symbol and untab that, and also untab this. So now you got room to take the leg out. Same with the other side, out of the way you get. Come around to the bottom and untab this rocket pod section from there. It rotates out 90 degrees. And then much like the original, the legs kind of separate out from here. It's one of the few things this transformation keeps. Everything is pretty new and original. Now, the big thing people often forget with these rocket pods is that they actually have an extra part that needs to flip out. On the back here with these trailer posts, they need to come all the way out. Otherwise, you'll be mistransforming both the base mode and the combined pants mode. But after that's done, basically what these pods do is they use the double hinge to rotate inwards. Now, there's two actual places they need to peg together. You've got a peg in there and a slot in here, and you need to make sure the ankle tilt isn't activated here. This is a separate ankle tilt to the actual foot there, just so it all works after transformation. And on top of that, there's a tab there that goes into that slot there. So you need to make sure everything lines up perfectly, and then it'll all work as smooth as butter. And then when that's done, the reason we brought the trailer post out is so that that can peg in there. It's supposed to mimic the turrets on the original release, although for some bizarre reason, none of the stock photography shows it. Bit of an error on their part. And normally for combined pants mode, this would fold down, but instead we're just going to leave it up like that. Now what you want to do is gently bring these up to the side, and this top panel will actually peg into there. This is why I praise this base mode way more than others I've seen on this channel before. It's got dedicated locking tabs. Everything actually locks in for once. Kudos, man. Anywho, just about done. You just want to bring these panels down here. Make sure the gun's removed, otherwise it won't work. Because then you just use the multiple hinges to get the turret into place. But of course the turret needs to be out of the way just so we can take this panel, bring it down, rotate it around, and peg it into place there, locking everything into place finally. And yes, that is an actual base mode. It's not just a bunch of parts farted out across the floor like they didn't give a shit. This isn't the same old bullshit we've constantly had to deal with, like Time to Turn Fort Max, or every other figure that seems to take inspiration from Time to Turn Fort Max. Why does every base mode keep having to take inspiration from Time to Turn Fort Max? It makes no sense. And this figure proves that you can do very similar transformation steps, but give them locking tabs and make everything purposeful. This is an actual base mode, and this is also a pretty damn good robot. All in all, a very fun transformation on both counts. Nothing crazy interesting, but at the end of the day, love it. Absolutely love it. In robot mode, Optimus Prime stomps onto the scene with the basic siegification we've all come to know and love. He's got the greebles, he's got the proportional fix-up, he's got the paint to really pop. Armada and G1 are both similar in the sense that you've got the cartoon, which is very flat, and the toys, which although covered in detail, remain rather reserved on it. They also both have the comics that the majority of the fandom forget about, so that aesthetic is often glossed over. No slight against the quality of said comics, but by and large, people just don't know about them. And much like most Generation 1 upgrades, Legacy takes a bit of toon and a bit of toy and puts it through a greebling filter, creating quite the looker of a lad. Given the similarities, it's really all they have to do to keep a consistent aesthetic, whereas shows like Prime and Animated needed a bit more work. Took them a bit, but hey, eventually we got there. The head sculpt is a lovely balance between the roundness of the toy design and the pointiness of the toon. The ears don't protrude as much as the cartoon, but they do give you enough height to become a prominent feature. I love the massive gold crest front and center. Speaking of, the gold they used really works well here. It leans more into the yellow side than the bronze one, but it pulls back enough so you don't end up with a Crayola-looking paint scheme. And by God, those eyes pop incredibly well. This is actually because there's an ever so subtle application of a darker blue right under them, a factor our Lord and Savior Mark Clonus was extremely giddy about. You can see how weird it would have looked by checking out the original. Looks like he's been blazing it too much, to be honest. Speaking of, they've opted to go for the toon-accurate yellow eyes rather than the toy-accurate gold ones. Honestly, I think this was for the best. The original kinda looks corpse-like with the eyes glazed over, or with a heavy dose of the Mary Joanna. Either way, great moves on the deco designer's part. I wouldn't say it's the best Optimus Prime head sculpt of all time, as I still think Earthrise absolutely nailed it way back when, but it's definitely up there as far as this current run of generations is concerned. The only thing at this point I could see them feasibly improving is incorporating light piping, but that's a whole other controversy in itself these days. God, I miss the days when light piping was universally loved. And sure, it lacks the mouth wobble gimmick that the original had, but was anyone really gunning for that anyway? Especially when it f***s with the proportions? Wasn't even in the show, mind you, so when I see people getting nostalgic for it, I become quite confused.
Are you kids all right? You're right. Red alert, hotshot, front and center. This is a very dangerous situation. Now let's put out this fire.
Moving further down, the change from grey to silver on the chest really makes this thing shine, no pun intended. Interestingly, they've simplified the details in comparison to the original, rather than greeble it the f*** up. Reckon I prefer it though, gives the feeling that it's a piece of armor that folds down, while the rest of it shows off its robot innards. The only part I feel is a slight downgrade is the difference in lights, going from Techno City to simple floodlights, but they still work reasonably well. One change I do appreciate though is the toon-accurate shoulders, actually painting in the black lines as opposed to simply implying them. Maybe they were a thing on the OG Takara version. I don't know. I don't care. This is cool. And even further down, we get a nice balance of new ideas and classic throwback. The thighs are mostly new, echoing some of the original detail, but reinterpreting it in a way that fits better with other War for Cybertron and Legacy figures. The legs are classic Armada Optimus though, albeit with bigger and better placed vents and copious amounts of greebling. Take a shot every time I say greebling. You'll be dead before we get to the base mode. They all blend together really well, and you lose none of the articulation despite what these things have to do. The side and back skirts do well to get out of the way, so you can finally actually pose this thing. I find it rather impressive that the crotch plate blends in so well. I was concerned it would be a mainline Nightbird type situation, but fortunately it genuinely works. Even the backpack cleans up well, although given the transformation, I don't see how they could have f***ed that up. Though to be fair, the Takara prototype did have quite a behind. It wasn't to a ridiculous degree or anything, and I'm not someone who typically cares for backpack kibble anyway, at least most of the time. It's just you can see they cared from practically every angle, and as a result, yeah, I honestly think this looks better than the Takara prototype. Bits are much more filled in, and he just exudes the chunk factor a lot more. To anyone still hoping that thing will come out, I don't know what to say, man. We've just got a better toy right here. Now moving on to accessories, he's got a respectable amount of them. Nothing too absurd, but to be honest, that's probably a benefit. Of course you have the built-in smokestack cannons, blast effect compatibility and all. Unfortunately, these don't combine like the original, but the original kinda looked dumb anyway, so nothing of value was lost here really. And hey, at least these are silver instead of clear. Guess the original was like this so they could access the light gimmick, but bruh, these just look ugly. His grill also opens up to reveal the same matrix we always... Actually, no! For once, we have a completely new matrix, which, sure, is accurate, but damn, it's nice to see. Apparently all the previous matrices have had completely different tooling, but f*** me, I can't tell the difference. It's also removable, unlike the original toy, so hooray for standard engineering progress. Probably should have been painted in the original, though. Orange or neon green would have been nice. F*** accuracy, I want colors.
Cheers, you're a gem.
Though on that topic, I have heard of QC issues where the gold fully paints in the clear section. Make sure to check yours. It's not super common, but it can happen. Just keep the receipt on hand. Finally, you have his big f***-off cannon. Basically, they took the original and removed that stupid grey bit on the bottom. It works before, so it works again. Of course, it's blast effect compatible, as it should be, and there's room for the smokestacks on the sides. I'm not a fan of this, to be honest. Them being on his forearms is quintessentially Armada Optimus Prime, so he sort of feels naked without them. Still, it's not something you ever have to engage with, much like Breakdown's extra backpack steps, so similarly, it's a non-issue. It's there if you like it. I just don't. For the most part, this figure is an absolute treat in robot mode. That said, as with every figure, there's always going to be caveats, and here we have two. The first one is minor, and the second one is substantial, but perfectly understandable. The designers, or I suppose Shogo Hasui, has or have made a conscious effort to slim down the truck and combined modes. This works well for the most part, but it does have the side effect of making the shoulders awfully thin in comparison to everything else. I think the idea was to have the wheels be part of the shoulders, and that has worked on figures before like Thrilling 30 Springer, but from certain angles, I don't think it works. It's not something I find myself getting too angry at, but personally I would have loved them to go the accurate route here. Still, it's something easily overlooked. The second issue, however, cannot, though honestly this one's more understandable. For the most part, the articulation is all present and accounted for. I know someone somewhere is going to complain about the trigger-happy shoulders, but that shoulder design is a quintessential part of Armada Prime as is, so I don't see a way around that. Plus, in my book, trigger-happy shoulders aren't really an issue anyway. People keep complaining they look unnatural, and I keep trying to see it from their perspective, but no matter how hard I try, I just can't. But the shoulders aren't the issue here. Rather, it's the waist. Unfortunately, due to the complicated hinge system inside the torso, this guy doesn't have a waist swivel. It's not a case of them cheaping out, there's literally no room for them to put one in there. That said, I would be lying if I said I didn't miss its inclusion. It's perfectly understandable, it's an impossible addition, but yeah, it kinda does stink. That being said, I do find it weird that the fandom piled on this figure, but Victory Leo, who does the same, gets a pass. Yeah, weird for Transformers fans to be inconsistent, I know! I'm guessing it's because that figure splits fully down in the middle compared to Prime's lower torso flip-me-do, and Leo felt more like a companion piece to the main event, who did have a waist swivel. Ah well, ultimately it is what it isn't. It's clear it hasn't been done out of laziness, which was the case with MP52. There's a genuine reason here. At least you get an ab crunch, which only gets one click, but hey, it's still neat to have. And hey, DNA might make their own adjustments, so for all we know, this time next year, this could be a non-issue if you're willing to pay the fee. Since they'd be upgrading an already good figure rather than salvaging a shit one, I think that's perfectly fine. Also, side note with the articulation, I do find it funny that this guy is more posable than what the fandom refers to as Bendy Prime. Goes to show how far we've come in nearly 2 decades. The toy made specifically for its articulation is now made entirely irrelevant. Of course, as good as Prime is, this isn't enough to satisfy the Commander price point alone. That's why, as par for the course, his trailer comes with a base mode. Come on, guys. Oi, shut up! Yes, I know, this is flat out not the Armada base mode. Aside from the inclusion of a turret section that happens to be able to house the cannon and the fact the waist section becomes convenient detailing on the top, this is a completely original design. And it makes sense too, the original was remote control automorph, and this modern release just can't be. Especially to facilitate combined mode articulation, cramming in the original base mode just wasn't feasible. I can understand some disappointment from classic Armada fans, as there is some iconicity in the tower and the foldable map flaps. That being said, let's take this base mode out of the context of 2002 and into the context of the current collection of Commander class figures. Skylynx. This thing seems great on paper, but in reality it doesn't particularly do much and the shuttle loves to fall off. Rodimus. This is literally a box that opens. Again, it's accurate, but it's boring. Motormaster. This is less a base mode and more a collection of random parts to justify the trailer out of the box. Compared to even the G1 base mode, because yes, G1 Gestalt torsos actually had base modes, this is a massive downgrade. Hell, Starsaver. This is just a bunch of limbs splayed out. Again, accurate to the source material, but you can't tell me this is a better base mode. Base modes are tricky because very rarely are they done to a high standard. Armada Prime is the first time in the Commander class lineup that I've actually felt compelled to use the base mode. It's got a clear, defined layout that doesn't just look like a bunch of limbs participating in an orgy. Sure, it's because it's just a bunch of boxes anyway, but they could have easily gone the boring route. Everything actually tabs in with dedicated tab slots not used in either of the other modes. I can pick it up without it falling to pieces. Sure, it doesn't do much, no extra panels or turrets, but I can't tell you how nice it is to have a base mode that actually feels like a base. Last time I felt that was Bloody Black Zarak, and he's nearly double the price. And speaking of pricing, this feels way more worth it in terms of play value than whatever the Rodimus was trying to do. Again, I keep having to make this clear. The core robot on Rodimus was fantastic, and in terms of sheer plastic quantity, the trailer justified its price tag. But me, it was boring. It only opened in G1 and nothing more, so that's all it does here. Save for a storage tray for the accessories. Oh, but it's the best version of G1 and it does it accurately. Bitch, I don't care that the hangar door has pistons to make it look cooler. It's still a goddamn box. How is that worth 160 Aussie dollary dues in play value? This here has an actual transformation on top of combination functionality, and neither compromise any other mode. This is what I want from base modes in Commander class, and I can only hope SS86 Ultra Magnus is half as well done. And even bringing it back to 2002, it's not like it's a complete downgrade. Sure, the multi-layered tower is nice, but you still had his jeans dragging across the floor. You don't get that on the Legacy version, it's just a solid weapons platform. Even if it doesn't do much, what it does more than covers the price of admission. And on the topic of cost of admission, sizing is pretty good here too. At first glance, it seems like he's quite similar to Rodimus, but a closer look reveals that Roddy has a much higher piece count. I still stand by my belief that they can't release Rodimus on his own because his parts count puts him above the leader price point. Optimus, however, definitely feels like he could make it. And lo and behold, multiple listings claim that Nemesis Prime is on the horizon, only just on his own minus the trailer. And you know what? I think that could work. work. Don't get me wrong, I love this trailer, and I love the combination even more, but there's still enough here to deliver a solid self-contained package. Sure, I'm glad they didn't pull a Bendy Prime and ignore the trailer entirely, but Robot and Vehicle Mode both present enough to cement themselves as a top-of-the-line figure. So far, 2 modes in, they've done an absolutely stellar job in updating the original clunker. It remains to be seen if they can stick the landing, but hopefully I've convinced you that this is something special. And hey, at least you're not flipping a coin to see whether yours gets stuck with gold plastic syndrome. That's always going to be a plus. The one thing I love about the combination conversion is that it's incredibly addicting. It's not particularly complex or anything, it's just the kind of transformation you find yourself wanting to do over and over and over again. I just love it. There's a couple of aha moments here and there, but the engineering never gets too full of itself. It's just a nice, solid transformation. I suppose we should start off with the power pants because then we can plug everything on afterwards. You want to untab these bits here, and that will allow you to bring the legs down, come to the bottom and bring the feet out like so, and then put the ankle flaps back so that it's got some more stability, and if everything works, he should have an ankle tilt now. That's why you gotta make sure these are tabbed in properly. Take these panels on the side and tab them into the side there, just like so. Take this whole section and rotate it upwards like so. Hear a nice click when it comes into place, and bring the missile pod and push it there. I do wish this locked in place in vehicle mode, as it does tend to wobble around, making tabbing it back in a bit annoying, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Just gonna get rid of that gun there because we don't really need it. What you want to do is take this and rotate it all the way up, bring it down like so. Take the front skirt and untab it from its base mode configuration. Make sure these side flaps are up, and that'll give you enough clearance to rotate the whole thing around. And then you can bring the hip skirts down like so. You want to take this panel up and bring this panel up as well. This will fill out the combined mode a little bit better, while this will secure it in place. I'm just going to bring this up for a little bit so that we can access the back here. You want to take this panel and it actually folds up into the back like so. Nice and solid, stays out of the way. And also one more step, provided you're not a dumbass like myself, you need to make sure these are folded into the backs of the back panel. It's not super necessary, but it cleans it up nicely, and I forgot to film it because I'm a moron. And then we can just bring this backpack down again because there's a nice little trick we can do to combine the two. And then of course Armada Prime is the same as the original with a few bells and whistles added in there, although the bells and whistles we do get are fantastic. And of course the thing won't shatter to a million pieces with the GPS because now we got nice solid plastic. You want to get the shoulders into place like you would for truck mode, the only difference being that instead of folding that all the way back, you just bring this up, which of course gives you access to the hinges there. Bring the hips forward so we have some space to work with, peg back in the hip skirts because they're going to become the shoulders, and get the arms out of the way so that we have a bit of clearance. We'll deal with them later. To make things a bit easier, it's best to bring this section down first because then we can separate it easier. Just like so, just like the original. Of course on the original I think doing such would have activated the auto morph, but thankfully we don't have that bullshit here. The head pops up like so and it locks into place with of course the ears going there at a nice 45-degree angle, and then we can start dealing with the arms, the base robot arms, not the combined arms. Using the double hinge they come back and they come forward, and then as they rotate back into their truck mode configuration they'll actually peg in the back there, and you can of course bring the fist as you like as well. They end up in the exact same place as the original toy, but they feel so much more cohesive. They're not just sticking out there at the back like they don't belong, they actually feel like they combine with the design. And then we get into that aha moment. You bring the legs down like that using the new forward hinge. Well, it's the same as the knee bend, but it comes forward to form the elbow. You open up the cavity here, fold in the foot, rotate the fist out like so, but don't close it up yet because you want to bring it a little bit more forward, and then at the back the feet actually folds backwards to fill in the hollowness, so that when you close it up, there's no hollowness on this forearm at all. That is brilliant. That is the kind of shit I love to see in Legacy and War for Cybertron. It's that classic Hasui charm, and I love it. And of course, if you're a dumbass like myself, you've probably forgotten to fold in the panels here, so of course they fold in here. Don't worry, they won't affect the combination. They're supposed to be like that. Now, the instructions insist you just plonk it on the top here and then combine the backpack, but I find it's a bit easier to do it the other way. You slot it into the backpack. There's a nice little slot there for the panel. You collapse it there, and that locks it into place. And then you hold these two together and you fold it over the top, and this is actually a lot easier in setting it up. Instead of having to finagle the backpack into place with the panel back there, this just works so much better. I don't think it's like that in the instructions though, that's just something I've discovered while transforming it a gazillion times. And yeah, it's a brilliant combination. It feels like an event, just as a combination should. It's endlessly addictive, you can do it over and over and over again, and it never becomes boring, and it doesn't dwell on it, it just says its piece and gets it over and done with. I haven't had this much fun with a combiner since Magic Square Menasor, not even Legacy Menasor gave me that. So kudos, man, it's a great combination, and I'll probably keep doing it for months and months on end. Well, not for now, I need to finish this video, but I really do want to go back to messing with this. Ah well, I have work to do. Look, I don't know what to say. A lot of you are gonna come in with a pessimistic attitude about the changes in plastic choices, the loss of gimmicks, the changes in size. A lot of you are gonna complain that this is a downgrade in every sense of the word. A lot of you will insist this is an insult to collectors and that you should go all out and buy the fans hobby version. But I'm sorry, those musings just aren't registering with me. Before me lies a piece that I can't describe in anything but one word. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Unequivocally, undeniably gorgeous. This is the kind of toy we just don't get very often, a landmark release that stands proud and true. This is Transformers. This is play value. This is respect for the source material. This is shining a light on where engineering is going into the future. The face sculpt looks like it jumped right off the screen, no longer looking squished like its original counterparts. The gold pierces through incredibly hard, and the two-tone blue around the eye sockets makes its return. It's regrettable that Hasbro Corporate reared its ugly head and refused to let them make these eyes red like the original, but not gonna lie, I kinda prefer the yellow they've chosen here. It actually works really well. It's not the best painted yellow I've ever seen, as it can get a bit wispy, but it's far from the worst either. They've also shrunk the ears a lot, so they don't look like golf sticks sticking out of the sides. While the eyes were a case of, yeah, I dig this, this here is a case of, yeah, this is infinitely better. Almost gives him a Wheeljack vibe, though he never loses that classic Armada identity. Regardless, it's a killer head sculpt in all aspects. If you're riding it off, or even the whole figure off, just because the eyes are a different color, I don't know what to say, man. You're missing out. The torso has had a bit of an upgrade as well. It's gone from a sort of wibbly, hollow mess to a massive oblong of fully armored goodness. They've now added extra paneling to the front to make the midriff flow a lot better. Subtle, but it works really well. Despite being a downward-facing truck on a completely different mass of legs, there isn't any stopping points. It all feels part of the same design, almost as if the torso doesn't transform at all. Initially, when seeing the stock photography, the grey shoulders bothered me, but seeing in person, they honestly don't even register. Plus, contrary to popular belief, these are accurate to the original. Yeah, people often forget with those rose-tinted goggles on. If you do find them a near deal breaker, fear not. I did speak with a Toy Hacks rep. They know it's a thing, and it's possible they're working on it. And moving to the middle, holy sh**, a molded Autobot symbol? How often do we get stuff like this these days? I get why they don't do it that often, because it locks them into only making singular faction version of molds unless they want to retool the whole thing. As such, it's really neat seeing something like this return, even if it's just a small part. I mean, sure, it could be better. The paint on my copy is a bit scuffed, and the port within is actually a lot scuffed. It's not a QC issue either. Everyone I've spoken to who owns it has reported the same thing, but whatever, it's damn good either way. Of course, the reason for this being removable is so that hopefully eventually an updated Jetfire can combine. Yes, it's dependent on how well this guy sells, but something tells me he'll do a little better than old Galaxy Upgrade. My money's on a leader class version, though it would be funny if 2 Commander class figures were called Jetfire, or I suppose 3. The arms do a pretty neat job as well. They're a lot shorter than the original, but that actually helps in the long run as it pushes them into the anime super robot aesthetic. Have you noticed how a lot of Japanese robots have really short arms but really long legs? That's actually intentional, and it gives a heroic demeanor. Of course, sometimes it can go too far, but thankfully this isn't one of those cases. The shoulders are a bit blockier than the original, and perhaps them being a bit wider would have been nice, but I reckon it's pretty good as is. The updated mechanical detail does wonders, and the raised height in comparison to the original really helps with the overall silhouette. The shorter tires allow for better blending with the forearm, and all of that lovely leg detail carries over to create one mean power punch. I really like the resplendent gold hands. The posing on them is a little limited, but considering everything this figure does already, it's no wonder the budget had to be cut somewhere. Apparently the intent was to have these use the same retractable 5mm port system as Jetfire and Starsaber, but they had to make cuts to fit the price point. Honestly though, I don't even know where they would have fit the damn thing, given the foot and swivel joint are already crammed in there. Still, ultimately they get the job done, and it's better than a simple 5mm fist at least. I'll happily swap out for articulated fingers with the eventual DNA kit or 3D printed upgrade, but as it is now, it's perfectly acceptable. Moving around the back, this guy is one clean motherfucker. We've gone from what was essentially skyscraper scaffolding to a proper utilitarian backpack. It doesn't even feel like like backpack kibble, it just feels like his back. Like, those are just the arms chilling there, but it never feels like that, unlike the original. Kudos, man. Hell, even the back skirt folds up nicely. It's clear it's kibble, but it keeps to itself and stays out of the way. And hey, if you really dislike it, you can always remove the turret to clean it up even further. Personally, I don't see much need for it, but it's an option. And even in its stock configuration, it's still leagues better than the disaster that is the Fans Hobby version. Yes, this is the part of the video where I piss off third-party fans. It was always going to happen. Look, I actually quite like Fans Hobby. Their pyro is really well made, and their double dealer feels like a redemption of the character after the horrible Earthrise version. Yes, it's wrong to compare Chug to 3P, but I needed a good double dealer, and they damn well provided. I also really want to get their Energon on Optimus Prime. That thing genuinely looks sick, employing a lot of similar tactics with upgrading aesthetics seen on Armada Prime here. But let's not kid ourselves here, Fans Hobby isn't new age. They still make duds on a semi-regular basis, just ask their Minerva. And honestly, with Prime here, that makes 2 times Hashtag have outdone Fans Hobby years after their attempt. I'm sorry, but Naval Commander is just not a good update. I'm sure it's a serviceable figure, but the alt mode is proportioned all wrong. The robot mode looks bloated and the combined mode is covered in trailer kibble that would make Canopy blush. For f***'s sake, who thought this was a good idea? And then there's the build quality issues, where apparently the thing tears itself apart with improperly toleranced ratchets and combiner joints. Again, Fans Hobby is typically a good company, it's just that Naval Commander is stinky, and Legacy easily runs laps around it. It definitely feels like there's a bit of coping with the fans who went in on Naval Commander thinking the Takara prototype was our only hope, and since it was squandered, said hope died with it. Definitely not the whole third-party niche, as a lot of fans are still happy with their 3PMP version, but that bitter taste is definitely there. Either way, it's a massive step above Fans Hobby. Yes, there are cases where the official beats the 3PMP versions. This is very much one of those cases. There's honestly very little I can criticize with this figure. The only problematic portion I can think of would probably be the legs. There are definitely a few oddities here, though at the very least it looks damn good. The classic turrets make their return, although they're just sculpted details this time as opposed to functioning gimmicks. Armada Megatron is actually very similar in this regard, but it's ultimately a sacrifice for the articulation, so I'll happily take it. One sacrifice that does annoy me, however, is the hip skirt assembly. Unlike the core robot, the combined mode is equipped with a waist swivel, below the aforementioned hip skirts. On top of this, he's also equipped with a mono skirt, so no matter how far you move the waist swivel, it always ends up looking unnatural. You can kind of fake it by using the embedded rotation, but there's only so much you can do. I fully understand why it is the way it is. The combiner joint doesn't leave a lot of room for a torso swivel in there, and hey, I'll gladly take this over Kibble Me Timbers over in the Navy. Furthermore, the side skirts have a tendency to get stuck on the hips, making leg posing a smidge difficult at times. It's only a minor annoyance, but it's something worth mentioning. And finally, no blast effect ports on the trailer posts. This might seem confusing, but these are, as mentioned earlier, a throwback to the turrets on the original toy. As such, when they flip out, it would have been nice to be able to recreate some of the original blue shaction. As it stands, they kind of just get left there and forgotten about. Hell, even the stock photography left them in there instead of properly lining them up. Twice! Oh well, this does nothing to ruin the overall package. Regardless, it's still an absolutely gorgeous release with stellar detail, paint, and articulation. In fact, I think this might be the first time a combined mode actually gains articulation in comparison to the original. Closest I can think of is the G1 Micromaster combiners, where the arms became technically more posable, but even then it's a stretch. Sure, you lose the ab crunch, but you gain a waist swivel, a knuckle crunch, and an extra shoulder joint for brilliant posing. It's not on the level of some of the third-party combiners I've handled, but it doesn't need to be. It's perfect for a Commander class figure, especially with the orgasmic symphony of ratchet joints. Seriously, these things feel and sound amazing. I'm so glad this didn't come out when I was a 10-year-old kid, where I'd have to use the joints really slowly for fear of disturbing anyone. Adult life may be filled with bullshit like taxes and the never-ending fight against bigotry, but I can ratchet away as much as I like, so it does have some benefits. So yeah, this figure is, well, awesome! In all 3 modes, it's delivered pretty close to flawlessly on every front. Is it perfect? No, of course not. No toy is. But it's so damn close given its price point that it might as well be. For the first time in a long time, it actually feels like you're getting the full play value out of the Commander fee. You can tell they spared absolutely no expense making sure this figure was up to par, to make sure both recent and long-time fans were satisfied. And with all that said and done, yeah, I'm pretty sure this isn't just the best figure I've gotten all year, but also the best commander figure of all time. Even if you count Starsaber, he still comes out on top with his absolute wipeout of fun factor. He may not do everything the original does, but what he does do more than makes up for it. It remains to be seen if the rumored SS-86 Ultra Magnus will dethrone him, but with a lack of an internal cab, I'm not sure that will happen. Sure, it will likely have a pretty nice base mode, and the car carrying functionality will be neat, but Armada Prime will still most likely be better. You just can't beat Ingenuity like this. It's unstoppable. And as if that wasn't enough, this figure still has hidden functionality. It's no secret that the original was designed to combine with multiple figures, and it's no secret that this version has the built-in ports to do so later down the line. However, there's always a chance that Hashtag won't even update the other two lads. Masterpiece Starsaber supposedly had built-in Victory Leo functionality, but given that thing shell-formed harder than the Combiner Wars Seekers, it's no wonder they never completed the combination. It's almost like geo-blocking a pole outside of Japan when you plan on releasing the figure internationally is stupid. Point is though, while there's a good chance we'll at least get Jetfire out of it, it's a ways off and things can change later down the line. To account for this, the designers have included a spare port at the back that allows for not just potential combination with a future update of Overload, but also the 2003 original. In fact, it even works in both modes. You can daisy chain the two trains together to make a rolling convoy of death, or I suppose a commander rolling convoy. As for the combined mode, yeah, it works, but barely. The joint is super loose, though it's difficult to tell whether this is due to the age of the original or if the compatibility is more of a coincidence than a feature. It's also really unbalanced. Filming this thing is legitimately proving a challenge. I was kinda excited to see this in person, but honestly, not worth the hype. Let's just hope Hasbro makes a proper one. The smaller size will actually end up being beneficial in the long run. The lighter plastic too. People complain about the lack of density these days, but it would actually kinda work in this instance. But of course, foresight aside, you don't actually get Overload in the box. They may SS-69 the set eventually and repack this guy, Jetfire, and Overload in 4 or 5 years' time, but out of the box, this is what we have. And in terms of what we do have, it's not a figure that does a lot. It isn't loaded with gimmicks or bogged down with automorph. It does one thing, and it does it exceptionally well. Bring the Armada Optimus Prime design into the modern era. It's a mode that doesn't have many bells and whistles, but because of that, it's able to focus on just being a fantastic toy. However, there's regrettably always going to be a group of people who think remaking this design at all is a farce. Current generations, according to data, does a very good job of appealing to both collectors and children alike, but some fans believe it's all skewed. It's far from the majority, but there are some people going around saying they should never have remade this in the first place. According to some, the main point of Armada Prime was the gimmicks. Apparently, when you remove all of them, the very identity is lost. Now, this seems a bit far-fetched, but I don't particularly take issue with people holding this standpoint. It's far from the most baffling take I've seen, and even though I disagree, I don't see a problem with it. My problem, however, is that these people then extrapolate into kids don't actually want articulation. And especially, no kid from the 2000s ever wanted articulation on the original. I'm sure plenty of kids were satisfied with what they got, but to enforce a blanket statement upon all young fans, past and present, just because you have an unyielding nostalgia for the original, that I take issue with. Look, I never grew up with the original Armada toys. I did form a strong connection with the show through uploads on Hasbro's official website, but I sadly never had access to any Unicron Trilogy toys beyond the last remnants of Universe 2008 shelf warmers. I do know, however, that even as a child of the movies, I always enjoyed the emphasis on articulation Revenge of the Fallen and Dark of the Moon presented. When something was missing, such as Skyhammer's thigh swivels, it was quite an annoyance, even as a kid. Now, of course, it wouldn't be fair for me to imprint my own personal experience with those who grew up with the Unicron Trilogy. I would be doing exactly what the subgroup was doing in relation to this figure's perception. So, I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going right to the source.
Hi, I'm Michael Vella. You may remember me as that one guy who was obsessed with Zeta Terrion's bodily functions. Back in the mid-90s, I was originally introduced to Transformers through my older brother, who showed me the awesomeness that is Generation 1. As I grew up, I formed a strong connection with Beast Machines, Animorphs, Robots in Disguise, and especially Armada. Armada Optimus Prime, along with Jetfire and Overload, was a pivotal part of my childhood collecting journey. As a kid, I loved making the big f***off truck train with Overload and Jetfire towing behind him. I also loved combining them into the super mode, but even at age 12, something was always lacking. The thing looked amazing, but as an action figure, it sucked. The automorph barely worked, so I always found myself converting the trailer by hand. That was the problem with a lot of Armada toys. They looked great, but the posing was awful. See, this is why Animorphs is superior, but that's neither here nor there. Keep in mind, these aren't things I've realized as an adult. If anything, I've mellowed out as I've aged. I've accepted it for what it is, but to say, kids never cared about articulation on Armada Prime, the f fuck? Do I not exist? The Commander is the toy that I wanted as a kid. My inner 12-year-old is screaming in excitement at this release. There's really nothing that feels lacking save for the retractable fists. Honestly, I'd take those over the inclusion of a mini-con, but even then it's absolutely a full package. If Teenage Michael would have loved this way back in 2002, kids will absolutely love this for decades to come. People keep saying it shouldn't have articulation, but like the rest of Legacy, if they don't improve that, what's the point? At that rate, it may as well be a reissue. We all know how much Transformer fans whinge about that. You really want to bring back the Automorph that doesn't work 80% of the time? Great job, Archer. Great job. Very good. Or worse, burns your house down. So far, Hasbro have nailed the other updates. Hotshot and Starscream were both excellent, and Armada Prime stands proud alongside them. What is it you want out of Transformers? What I want is a functioning action figure where the gimmick is transforming, not other rubbish that gimps the articulation. And I reckon a lot of kids want that too, just as I did 2 decades ago. Honestly, where Transformers is going, I feel really spoiled.
Legacy Evolution Armada Universe Optimus Prime isn't necessarily a release that does something unique. Aside from being the best Armada update we've done so far, he's brilliant in a laundry list of ways, but if you really take a step back, there's not much that's particularly salient to discuss. He's an absolutely fantastic figure, but is not necessarily one I'd usually find myself talking about. I don't typically go for the best figures in my collection in terms of reviews, or even the worst. Rather, I try to focus on figures that are interesting and might allow the viewer to consider something from that different point of view. Often what I consider to be the best or worst happens to align with that, especially in the cases of bad figures, because why something fails is easy fodder for analysis. But usually figures like this aren't ones I find easy to discuss. Legacy Evolution Tarn, Masterpiece Eva Convoy, and Studio Series 86 Grimlock are all fantastic figures that demolish all previous versions. In many cases both official and unofficial, but there isn't particularly much I can say about them. They're just damn fine figures, in some cases they're even the best figure of their given year. Beyond that though, they're not interesting to talk about. So, with my self-imposed restriction, why do I feel compelled to write about Armada Prime? At the time of writing, it's been exactly 3 weeks since I received my copy, and every single day since then, this figure has captivated me. Quite literally, I'd been at work, and all I could think of was going back home and messing with Armada Prime. See, if it were like a week after I got him, I'd understand, but that feeling just hasn't gone away. I don't typically like to review things right after I get them, lest I rate them too positively or negatively, as I haven't had time to get into them. And yet, regardless of day, I just can't stop messing and beholding this beast of a thing. No other commander previously has made me feel this way. Skylynx came close, but not on this level. This video wasn't supposed to be Armada Prime, it was actually going to be the long overdue second opinion on Combiner Wars Megatron. Yet, for some reason, that review fell into a state of writer's block, while Armada Prime's writing process just flowed like water. It shouldn't have, it's not a unique kind of figure. It's amazing, but what does it actually do that's special? After racking my brain for days on end, I think I have it. Legacy Evolution Commander Class Optimus Prime is both a victory lap and a checkpoint. He represents everything brilliant about the franchise right now, everything both myself and a lot of fans love. He's an update of a classic character fans have wanted for years, breaking free of Generation 1 oversaturation, but at the same time he's also imbued with a multitude of new ideas and concepts in his engineering and mechanical detail. He's a figure that unites both fans of old who have bore witness to this franchise's diverse history, new mature fans getting into collecting for the first time, who will get a feel for what this franchise is really about, and children discovering Transformers in their formative years, who will most likely cherish this toy for decades to come, and through that they'll discover a wide landscape of parallel continuities before them. Fans old and new will discover and reminisce the quality of engineering we're privy to these days, and decades from now people will look back fondly on the United War for Cybertron and Legacy aesthetic, even if it didn't work 100% of the time. Of course, nothing lasts forever. Word on the street is the senior designer role for the Transformers brand has been filled internally, and my gut tells me it probably isn't a member of the dream team we currently adore. Post-Legacy, we may very well see a shift in focus. We could see a return to the dark ages of the Wardinator, or we could see an even greater rise in quality, or nothing could change at all. We just don't know. But for now, Armada Prime is the checkpoint. He represents everything myself and many others hold dear at this very moment. He will likely be a time capsule for the Legacy Trilogy era, a perfect balance of classicism and reinvention. Armada Universe Optimus Prime is Transformers Legacy. Though he doesn't seem to be Evo Fusion because his box art seems to forget it's a thing. But as always, fandom public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on this pivotal release below. Do you think Armada Prime is essential in the Transformers tapestry? Or do you think he'll be forgotten in the years to come? Are you planning on picking him up, or does he not tickle your fancy at all? Were you able to navigate the hellscape that was the Big W online toy sale, or did that unattainable listing for Motormaster cause you to spiral into depression? Couldn't be me. I ironically ordered from Singapore only to realize shipping was a separate invoice, so I overpaid by 20 bucks. Honestly though, still worth it. Anywho, as always, remember, there's a context for everything, especially here where Prime becomes the context himself. Till next time.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you an urgent news report. Weather stations across the state of New South Wales are reporting a thick fog permeating the area. As it becomes denser, onlookers are reporting counts of idiocy. Local Woolworths are being flooded by complete and utter morons, drained of all intelligence and compelled to purchase some sort of knick-knack. Furthermore, the fog is spreading beyond the state of New South Wales. It is estimated within days the entirety of the county will be covered, and within weeks the entire country. This is a direct instruction to any of you watching at home. Please stay at home. I repeat, do not leave your property. We now go live to reporter Wayne Kerr, who's live on the scene now.
Fog everywhere!
Top-notch reporting there, Wayne. Tell me something we don't know.
It's the end time!
Sal down, you silly. We're live on national television.
This mask doesn't work, and I'm gonna get to Woolies!
So, this just in, we're all doomed.